Hi, this is Melissa Horak Hearn, reference librarian at Johnson County Library, and welcome to our first episode of Did You Hear Extras? We've got a round table with my good friend Greg Windsor.
Hey, Melissa, how's it going?
Great. How are you doing, Greg?
Doing well. Thank you for having me.
And who else do we have over here, Greg?
We have Carrie. Carrie, introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Carrie, and I am an information specialist at Monticello and DeSoto.
I think that we're going to talk a little bit about what we like about books, period. What's your favorite kind of book to read? Carrie.
I enjoy strong female characters, and I like a lot of meat to my characters. I want to be very engaged in their life and feel like I've lived in an entirely different place and country, and then I can come back to be me.
Do you want them to be like you?
No, I want them to be completely different from me. That's why I enjoy reading so much.
What about you, Greg? What do you like in your characters?
I'm kind of like I'm Carrie in that I'm not big into being immersed into the book that I'm reading, but I love, one of the things I really notice about my personal taste is that I like the darker, the twistier, and the more dark and twisty the book is, the more I am to like it, which is really kind of at odds with my own personal, because I'm a nice person in like normal life, but I like to read all these books where people do horrible things to each other, psychological thrillers and crime dramas and all these things. So I think I'm living vicariously through the books that I read. Maybe.
Carrie and I had a conversation a lot like that the other day. I said that for me a perfect read would be like The Beach, or no, The Road. I'm sorry, The Road.
Mm-hmm.
The Road by Cormac McCarthy. Where
No.
The Road.
No, I know that's a great book, but it is one of the most darkest, most depressing things I have ever read. But
it's one where like every 5 pages you have to put it down just to give yourself a little bit of a break.
Yeah,
and like it shredded me, and for a couple days after that, I didn't feel quite right. That doesn't seem like the kind of experience that a person should be going for.
That's why we read literature. We kind of use it has to provoke that emotional reaction to either to kind of envelop us in the warm love of a story well told, or to kind of shock us into to feeling something, if it's like revulsion or even post-apocalyptic thrillers where everything is so dark, even the smallest point of light is the most important thing, and that's what's wonderful about literature.
So challenge through terror and horror, or challenge through love and snuggliness.
Absolutely.
Warmth.
So Carrie, can you tell us about a warm and snuggly book that you've read recently?
Ooh, let's see. I don't read a lot of warm and snuggly books for some reason, because I am a lot like Greg, and I am a super, super nice person, and no one thinks that I read horrible, gritty murder mysteries and thrillers and World War II fiction. Let's see. I read The Cartel by Don Winslow, and that is about as far away from warm and snuggly as you can get.
I love Don Winslow.
He is my hero because he writes such gritty novels that I feel like I've changed as a person from them, and I don't know if that's great, but I found so many other authors because of him.
Well, another reason why I like Don Winslow is not only is he just kind of do this gritty crime thriller, he does great characters, and he does these things in this operatic, big, sweeping, saga. So it's almost like you're watching The Godfather or Goodfellas or something in print form, and these great, big, larger-than-life characters that you just can't help.
You don't find that kind of sweeping, epic drama in crime thrillers that often.
Read Don Winslow. You should.
The Godfather is the one that I think of too.
Yeah.
Yes, I will read some Don Winslow now.
Yes, put it on your list.
I think I will.
Yeah, The Cartel, he's got a sequel, or that's the first in a 3-part series. The third part's coming out next year. Last year he came out with one called The Force, which is Goodfellas with corrupt cops instead of mobsters. It's really, really good. It made my best of lists for last year.
So that is Carrie's warm and snuggly.
Yes.
Shall we say winter holiday suggestion?
Yes.
What about you, Greg?
Well, I've already talked about my love for gritty crime, psychological thrillers, so I don't really have anything that's warm and fuzzy to talk about. But I will say there's a book called Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens. It takes place back in the 1950s, kind of the outer banks of North Carolina. This very poor family kind of are raised in isolation, kind of off the grid. And the father and the children eventually drift away, leaving one girl who's raised there by herself and is on her own. And she occasionally sneaks into town and kind of has this subsistence existence. And then years later, a dead body is found in the marshes. And she's the only one that's around that's kind of the outsider. So she is kind of fingered for it. So it's flashback for her upbringing and flash forward to this kind of trial that you get to find out what's happened to her over the years. It is absolutely compelling, and it was mentioned by Reese Witherspoon for her Instagram book club, which is a big deal now, but it's a fabulous book.
And if you'd like to read and discuss that book, we are going to be talking about it at the February meeting of both the Monticello and DeSoto book groups.
Way to sneak the plug in, Carrie.
About
well done.
A facilitator right there.
Pretty proud of myself.
Well, in keeping with our warm and fuzzy and snuggly trend, I'm going to say that my offering is I'll Be Gone in the Dark
by Michelle McNamara.
Yeah. And it can be warm and snuggly when you stop and think that after she passed away, her husband, Patton Oswalt, worked his took us off to make sure that the book got published. That's love. That's snuggly.
Now take us back for a second. This is as I recall, it is a true crime book about a serial killer in California.
Yes, McNamara was an investigative journalist, and she found that she had a deep personal interest in, kind of like you, the nastiness of life, the underbelly, the seaminess, and she got kind of addicted to somebody who she started calling the Golden State Killer out in California. And it was her and a bunch of folks who followed a true crime website that she used to keep up that put all of the pieces together. And by the time her book was actually published, the information that she had given over to law enforcement in California had led them to the killer.
So the guy is actually currently behind bars.
He sure is.
In part because of
her addiction to his story.
That's amazing.
Because of her obsession, yeah.
And it has popped up on a lot of year-end best-of lists. So
yeah, it was remarkably well written. You could tell that she had a real passion for what she was talking about. But you really got to kind of crawl inside her head. She almost became another character because all of this was sort of the story of her doing this work.
So it's
very
kind of
interesting.
So it's autobiographical as well as
a little, yeah.
Uh-huh. Now, do you like those true crime podcasts where a lot of that content is kind of drawn out?
More than I think I probably should.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, it's that weird vicarious thing again. Like, lately I've been listening to a lot of Canadian true crime podcasts because the CBC has some really good things going on.
Really?
What's going on in Canada?
Well, particularly with murdered and missing Indigenous women and Indigenous children, there's been a lot of attention given rightfully to that phenomenon. And there's a woman who does a podcast called Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women, and she recently did one called Finding Cleo. That season was Finding Cleo, and it was a little girl who had been taken from her home on a reservation and kind of bounced around to a couple of different foster families and passed away, and nobody seemed to know what had happened to her.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now, Carrie, have you read any true crime or?
I don't really read a lot of true crime or nonfiction books. I like to stick in the realm of fiction. And
Do you ever read any nonfiction about World War II? I know that in our earlier podcast, you had mentioned that you're pretty down with World War II.
I am. Very occasionally. I don't read a lot of nonfiction for some reason, which kind of surprises me because I love history and knowing about things. But I think I like the fiction aspect of it because you get the personal stories as well as the history woven in.
That's interesting. I'm like the reverse of that.
Yeah.
I like nonfiction and I like to know the facts about something, but I prefer the small man of history. You know, like the women in the choir in the book that you were talking about in our podcast episode. I like hearing about their experiences, but like the actual people who lived through them.
that's a huge trend in historical fiction right now, where it's instead of like writing a book about the great men or women of history, the
Yes.
Julius Caesars, the
Yes.
Alexander the Greats, the whatevers. It's about the guy behind the guy. It's
Yeah.
it's the smaller kind of voices that.
I'm here for it.
Yeah, that's much more fascinating, right?
It
Yes.
is. I really dig too those living history shows. Like I call them the house shows. Manor House and 1900 House and 1940s House, where they take a current day family and plunk them down in a different situation and film them while they try to live. Because that's the kind of historical things that I wonder about. Like, how did people blow their noses? How did they wash their socks?
How do they live without air conditioning?
Right? Oh my Lord! How did they
Yes.
live in Kansas, in the Kansas City area without air conditioning 100 years ago? I don't think they did.
No, I don't think
I think it's all a lie.
Yeah. Big AC has been holding out on us all those years, I think.
Big conspiracy theory going on right here.
Yes.
Big AC has been hiding the truth from us for years. All right. Well, this is getting a little silly. So I think that I'm going to have to say thank you, Carrie. Thank you for joining us for this Did You Hear Extra? And thank you, Greg.
Thank you for hosting, Melissa.
I'm Melissa Horak-Hearn, and this is Did You Hear signing off.
For more episodes of Did You Hear, go to the Johnson County Library website, jocolibrary.org/didyouhear.